The Edith Farnsworth House by Mies van der Rohe is perhaps one of the most analyzed buildings of the modern era. For the layman, it may be a difficult building to understand or to enjoy. After all, it appears to lack the potential for sentimentality. Designed as a home, should it not be more familiar and more comfortable? This is a building celebrated by many architects, but perhaps not truly beloved by that same audience. The Farnsworth House raises the question, as all good buildings do, should it have been designed in this way? I will explore three main criteria in my critique of the Farnsworth House. Is the experience of the space designed? Is the design deliberate and stimulating? And does the building serve the inhabitant well? The first question to be asked is whether or not the experience of the space is designed. In the case of the Farnsworth House, the experience is designed and curated to the point that the design essentially dictates the behavior of the inhabitant. The architect displays a deep insight into the basic inclinations of the human person and uses the design to challenge and adjust the way they live and move. The most obvious move which impacts the experience of the space is the total transparency on all sides. While it is successful in creating a sense of continuity between interior and exterior, unifying the inhabitant with nature, this sensation is most obvious when you are close to the glass. As you back away, an awareness of the distinct built quality of the space creates a feeling of being exposed or on display, which certainly affects the behavior of the occupant. Where visual security may be lacking due to the transparency, spatial security is introduced by raising the entire floor plate off of the ground by 5 feet. The long horizontal planes of the roof, floor, and deck seem to float due to the careful placement of a few vertical elements. This successfully creates a particular ethereal quality in the building. While it is visually successful, the spatial experience upon ascending the platforms is perhaps not as dramatic as the architect intended, since the human occupant tends to focus more on what they see than where they stand. Additionally, part of the decision to raise the building was to protect it from flooding, which was ultimately unsuccessful due to miscalculations. On the interior of the space, the careful placement of a few simple elements have a major impact on the experience. For example, the fireplace, which is open and exposed, forces the occupant to be aware of their surroundings and again adjust their behavior accordingly. This successfully promotes an attitude of thoughtfulness and care as you move through the space. Finally, the social experience of the space is dictated by the hierarchy of traditional domestic spaces. The kitchen is off to the side and quite narrow, not a place for gathering. The space is not ideal for entertaining, which suggests an attitude of solitude be adopted by the inhabitant. Again, the space successfully defines the type of experience a person might have within it. The second question I will address is whether or not the design is deliberate and intentional. The Farnsworth House is such a simple building that every single detail and placement is entirely intentional. It challenges the idea of living and being at home by a stimulating depth of detail. A space that would be traditionally for rest or repose becomes a place where the mind is constantly active. The first deliberate move you encounter at Farnsworth is the entry procession. There is only one entrance and only one way to access it, by ascending the small set of floating stairs from platform to platform. The human person becomes very aware of their new relationship to the ground and to the building. Another level of thoughtfulness and intentional detail is demonstrated in the strict grid system, which provides the framework for every design decision inside and out of the building. The careful alignment of so many elements is something that once noticed can no longer be ignored as you live within the space. Finally, the window details are extremely thought out, which makes sense given the importance of the transparent quality of the space. Rather than extruding into the space, the structure of the window frame is recessed wherever possible to minimize the impact on the interior. Mies derived the simplest possible way to make each visual connection. The final question remains, does the building serve the inhabitant? This is perhaps the area where Farnsworth House has the most failings. While the basic necessities for a house are provided, their use is challenged by the design. This makes it a difficult building to live in unless the occupant is willing to enter into the new order proposed by the design. In this way, the building technically serves the inhabitant, but it also could be said that the inhabitant is in service to the building. An example of the building's flexibility to the needs of the inhabitant is the bathrooms. While one bathroom would be all that is absolutely required, 2 bathrooms are provided to appease the natural desire to have a more private space for the permanent resident. In a building which fundamentally cries out against privacy, this seems to be a major concession by the architect, but one that serves the resident well. Another concession is the installation of curtains around the perimeter of the space. This allows the resident some consolation if they struggle with the intent of the design. While the space is entirely planned out, the building is still a building. It receives a resident who will live a life there. While the design makes this a unique challenge, it is entirely possible, especially if the resident is willing to adopt a lifestyle compatible with the space and all its design qualities. Overall, I would say that this is great architecture. It is one of few buildings that I enjoy purely architecturally and not for its sentimental value or meaning. By its very design, it is not a recipient of human emotion, but rather a stimulus for thought. Every detail is thought out, and those ideas seep into the space, through the space into the inhabitant, who receives the building as much as the building receives them.